Well, happy Easter, everybody. Happy Easter. Regardless of the rain, it is good to be here. It is good. And he is risen. Spoiler alert. Just wanted to let you know ahead of time. Obviously, you know where I stand. He has risen. He has risen indeed. Yeah. But you know what I'm most excited about is actually getting to do Easter here at McMinimum's. I love this space. As someone who grew up in Aloha, Oregon, in case you don't know where Aloha is. It's uncharted territory, so don't ever look at a map, you'll never find it. But I grew up around here, and it's cool to kind of know the history of the whole space and being here. In fact, I'm so excited to be doing Easter in Embry Meadow. That's where you're sitting right now. If you're not familiar with the last name Embry, Robert Emery acquired this property and much of the property around here in the 1850s. And he established his first building on the property, a storehouse, in 1859. And then the decade after that, his family got really big. And so he's like, well, I got to build a farmhouse. And so he built a 3-story farmhouse that is still sitting on this property today. In fact, it's right over there. And later, kids, we're going to get to go inside it, adults, you as well, to go kind of check it out and look at the historic building. And the reason that we get to do that is because over 100 years later, McMinimum's comes along and they lease out the property with the hopes of putting a pub on it. But they also had another intention, which was to establish this place as a historical site and preserving the buildings on it. And I think it's so cool because we have this history that we can see. Now, what do you think the focus of the farm was? Does anyone have a guess? Is it wheat? Barley, maybe? Something to do with a pub that sparked McMinimum's interest? No, the focus was horses. This was a horse farm. And so Embry Meadow was where all the horses would trot through because their stables were around here in this area over here. But my question for you this morning, as I've given you way too many facts, is how concerned are you about how many horses roamed this field over 100 years ago? Probably not very concerned. Does it change your life? Now that you know that there were horses right here 100 years ago, is your life changed? Forever changed? You're going to live your life differently now, right? But if I was going to tell you, not just 100 years ago, but over 2,000 years ago, if Jesus walked this earth, that he came, he died on a cross, and then he was sent to the grave dead, but then rose from the dead, that he resurrected, suddenly everyone's got an opinion about it, right? Everybody's concerned about this thought. They're concerned about what this is because if it were true, it changes everything. It changes how we look at the world. It changes how we live our life. It changes how we understand how we're supposed to live. But if you're the type of person that's like, but I need to see it for myself, I'm with you. I'm the type of person, too, that's like, I really wish I was there. If I saw the resurrection, man, I believe it so much more, just a little more concrete, right? That I've got that physical proof that I've seen it and witnessed it for myself. Because how can I believe in something that I've never seen before? I haven't seen a resurrection in my lifetime, so how do I know that it's a regular occurrence, it's a thing that we can expect and have happen, right? Well, did you know that Jesus' resurrection actually wasn't the first resurrection? In fact, one of the many miracles that Jesus performed, one of them was the resurrection of Lazarus. He brought Lazarus back from the dead. And Jesus had made this comment, and it's in John 11. The sisters of Lazarus, Mary, Martha, they loved Jesus. Lazarus loved Jesus. Jesus loved them. They're like friends. They're best friends. And they sent word to Jesus to tell him that their brother is sick, that he is sick and he is dying. And here, this is what just piqued my interest, and this is what Jesus said. If I can find it in my Bible. Hang on a second here. There's too many notes in here. All right, here we go. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory." When have you been sick? You ever thought that for yourself for a second? Like, oh, I got the sniffles. That's for God's glory, right? I'm in the hospital. That's for God's glory. But it is because he says, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then Jesus stood around for 2 days. Now, if you've heard of a good friend of yours who's sick, that's ill, that's possibly dying, don't you think you'd be like, well, I got to get a plane ticket, I got to get there, I got to be there, I got to at least go say my goodbyes, right? But Jesus, the type of friend that he is, he just stands around 2 days and just kind of waits. And eventually he tells his disciples, okay, let's go to Judea. Let's go back. And now, Jesus at this point had been talking about his death for quite a while now. His disciples are very concerned. Why is Jesus talking about dying so much? And they're concerned because he keeps saying that when we go back to Jerusalem, that is when I will die. And so now he's saying we're going to start headed that direction. Why? That's a terrible idea. And so the disciples say, but Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews, they tried to stone you there. And yet we're going back? Why would you go back, Jesus? At this point, you've said so many things that have ticked off so many people. Why would you go back? But he says, he promises, he says, because I am the hope in the darkness. I am the hope in the darkness. And then he tells them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad. I'm glad that I wasn't there. I'm glad that I wasn't there because now you may believe. So let's go back. And Thomas, one of the disciples, Thomas was there and he rallied the disciples and he basically said, okay, let's go with Jesus. Let's go. And so they're going into the town and they're just outside the town at this point. And Martha runs out of the town to meet up with Jesus. And when she reaches Jesus, she says, if you had just been here, Jesus, if you had just been here, my brother would still be alive. But then Jesus tells her this. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives, believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into this world. Now notice that Martha already believes. She already believes. She hasn't even seen him resurrect her brother, but she believes. And I don't mean that she necessarily believes in the resurrection power. Trust me, that's going to come as a shock to her when she sees her brother. What she does believe in is she believes in Jesus as her Christ, as her Savior and Lord. She runs back into town, tells her sister Mary. Mary runs out of town to go meet Jesus. Jesus hasn't even moved an inch yet. And they go through the same process all over again. Jesus, if you'd just been there, my brother would be alive. But Mary, she is sobbing with tears. And this is where that famous verse in the Bible, the shortest verse, Jesus wept, takes place. That he's deeply moved by their sorrow. And so Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. He went into town and he came into the tomb, and there was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And he said, take away the stone. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been in there for 4 days. I'm with you, Martha. I'm very sensitive to smells. I'm not sure I'd be up for it either. Right? But then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, he directs everything back towards his Father in heaven now, God. And he says, he took away the stone and he looked up and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of everyone standing here. I said it for them so that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, Jesus called in with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And what do you think happened? Nothing? No. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said to him, Take off the grave clothes and let this man go. Remove the signs of death from this man and let him be free. Man, if you were there, if you had seen that, everybody there, they've got to believe at this point, right? They just saw a dead man come out of a cave, right? Wrapped in the normal garment. There's no tricks. The tomb was closed. You'd think everyone would believe at this point. Man, I believe. I believe in you, Jesus. I believe in your resurrection power. I'm going to follow you for the rest of my life. I'm going to do that now. It totally makes sense because I've never seen this before. You'd think everyone would do it standing there. Nope. Now, some people that day believed in Jesus and started following him, but others, they ran straight to the chief priests, the ones that were trying to stone Jesus. And they told him what he did. And they told him, he's like, we don't believe in any of this. You got to do something about it. And the chief priests begin to plot. They begin to plot and prepare to kill Jesus, but also kill Lazarus, because you got to get rid of the evidence. Can't have Lazarus standing around. We got to kill him. We got to get rid of him. Man, let me tell you this. Seeing does not always guarantee believing. You have to understand this. I know that we wish sometimes that we just see this sign from God. If God would just show his resurrection power, we'd all believe. I can't guarantee that we would. So after Jesus' own resurrection, after Jesus dies on the cross and resurrects, news travels out. And it gets to his disciples, all his disciples who have deserted Jesus at this point. They've gone back home just looking for comfort. And news travels to them that Jesus is alive, right? And then eventually, news travels to Thomas. Remember Thomas? And do you know what Thomas says at that point? Thomas, his own disciple, he says, unless I see the holes in his hands, and unless I put my finger and I put it through that hole, and unless I take my hand and I put it through the whole side where they pierced him on the cross, unless I can do that, what? I will not believe. I won't believe. I won't do it. This is where I have to pick up my notes. Here's the irony of this. Wasn't Thomas there? Didn't Thomas believe? Didn't he see the resurrection power already? What happened? He was there. He witnessed Jesus perform the miracle. It's not like he's never seen a resurrection before, right? You would think, when you hear Jesus is alive, well, that's plausible. I've seen resurrection before. That kind of makes sense that it might happen. I might doubt it for a second. Kind of need to see it for myself, but at least he's got some idea. Instead, Thomas goes through gruesome detail of what he wants, right? You got to prove yourself to me, God. Prove yourself. Wasn't enough. Why? Well, maybe because he had Jesus on his side when he saw Lazarus, right? Maybe at that point. But then life got a little harder, didn't it? And he didn't have Jesus anymore just beside him all the time. Maybe life gets a little too difficult, that time continues on. I had physical evidence here before, but now, I don't know, it's a new day. Prove yourself again to me, God. Right? Prove yourself to me. I just think this is very interesting because it places such a high value on us as such a high authority over all of creation, doesn't it? That I'm the standard of truth. I got to tell you, I barely have my life figured out. And then I'm going to assume that I also have a firm grip on all truth over all creation, over all reality. That I'm going to be the deciding factor. Everyone come up to me. You prove yourself to me, and I'll decide whether or not it's true or not. Right? Man, so God turning on a dime for us. Let me tell you something. I know that we want that, but I promise you it will never be satisfying. Eventually, there's always a new day and always a new time when we just ask God, prove yourself again. Show me that again. I love Jesus here in this moment with Thomas. Here's what happens. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. The Gospel of John's very clear to say, just remember Thomas. Thomas was with them. And through the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he directly put his attention to Thomas. He went straight to Thomas and he said, "Thomas, put your finger here. Put it through my holes in my hands. See my hands. Reach out, take your hand, put it in my side. But stop doubting and believe." Stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting. Stop going through this cycle where you just need another one. Just give me another piece of evidence one more time and believe. You know the Greek word for believe? We tend to think of it more like head knowledge, right? Right? I see the cookie. I know the cookie exists. But have you tasted the cookie, right? See, head knowledge only goes so far in life. At some point, we need this transformation to take place where we have this heart knowledge, this understanding. This word believe, what it means is an active trust. That we trust in something when we believe. That we're putting our full weight on this thing. And Jesus is saying, believe in me. Believe in me. In verse 28, Thomas said to him at this point, "My Lord and my God." I don't need to put my hand through your side. I don't need to put my finger through the hole. I believe. I believe. But then Jesus says this to him. He says, because you have seen, you believe. That you believe today. It might change again, but you believe today. But blessed are those that believe and have not seen, yet they believe. Like Martha. Martha who believed. She didn't need anything. She didn't need that physical evidence, right? And then verse 30, it continues, and this is what it said. Verse 30, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. What? Don't you think you'd want to write those down? Don't you think I want every miracle, collect all the evidence, put it together, right? I want it all. There are things you and I, to this day, we don't know everything that was miraculous that Jesus did. But it continues and says this, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, that by believing you may have life in his name. So we forget the importance of testimony. We forget that we have witnesses who testify. That right here in my hands, I have ancient text that tells us of the things that happened 2,000 years ago. And I know that we live in an age of information. Man, there is so much information at this point. I can barely grasp all of it, right? And then on top of that, because there's so much information, there's also disinformation now. That we have no idea what to believe. But that doesn't mean that we throw out the idea that we need testimony to understand things. You can't throw out our need for testimony. Now, you might be the type of person that says, look, I get you. I'm following so far, but I need scientific evidence. That's just how my brain works. I'm a type of person that's got to be very scientific. We got to look at it like this. Right? Well, my response to you at this point is, good. That's good. That's very good. You pursue that. I encourage you to pursue that. Find as much scientific evidence as you can. But, here's what I'm going to tell you. It's only going to go so far. It's only going to go so far because there's a point and a difference where head knowledge needs to be transformed to heart knowledge. You know what's interesting about the scientific method? You understand the scientific method? It's the idea of doing a test in order to produce the results over and over again, the same results, producing it over and over. Do you know what the scientific method can never prove? History. It can't prove history. Because, why? Well, because we have to rely on testimony to understand what's happened before. Even as you're doing the scientific method, I did the first test. Time has gone by. You're relying either on your own testimony or someone else's testimony that the results were this. I wrote them down. Testimony. And then you're doing them again. Time goes on. And that's what's so interesting about time, is that time requires us to have to trust in some type of testimony, some type of witness of what's come before. Right? So maybe we could go back in time and have Jesus resurrect again. We could do that. We can't do that. As much as that's science fiction, you love the idea, you watch a lot of Star Trek, you think it's possible, it's not. We can't go back into time. I'm so sorry. Well, maybe we could just ask Jesus to come back. Why don't we do that? Right now, let's all pray and ask Jesus to come back right here now. We'll get a cross, we'll put you on the cross, you'll die again, and then we'll see if you resurrect. And then we've got at least 2 tests, right, of the same results. Now we'll know. Now we'll absolutely know, right? No. But if we do that, we've all missed the point. We have all missed the point. If we're asking Jesus, once again, please die for me, and resurrect so I know and I can believe in your resurrection power. We missed the point. Why do we miss the point? Because Jesus didn't come to prove himself. He didn't come to establish evidence. That's what Lazarus was for. When Jesus died on the cross, he accomplished a task. And only heart knowledge is going to get us there. Because heart knowledge will have us ask the question, why? Which head knowledge cannot answer. Why would you do such a thing? Why would you give up your life and do that? For me. Why? Jesus entered our history. Do we realize that? That at the epicenter of our timeline, there he plucked up everything and covered all the sin over every point in time. And he died right there for that. And then he didn't let it be like that. He didn't just pay for the sin. He offers us something else. He offers us life with him forever by overcoming the obstacle that we're all headed towards. That time and history has shown us by testifying we're all headed towards death. But for him, he says, no, death is overcome. I have overcome death, and if you believe in me, you will have life. What I love about Jesus so much is that he himself testifies. That he spent his time walking on this earth testifying about the good love of his Father, the good love of God. Then what he has come to do, he testifies about that. And then on top of that, if you're looking for something else, a little more evidence, he demonstrates it. He demonstrates to what he's testifying about, and he goes to the cross. He doesn't just say, this is what needs to happen. He actually does it. He shows the Father's love. And now, to this day, we have testimony. There is substantial evidence that concretes this Bible, that shows us that this is the most accurate text on the earth. There's physical evidence that you can explore for all your life, but it'll never get you to the why. The why will come from our hearts being opened up by testimony, by hearing the good news. That the church testifies. That's what happens immediately after Jesus dies. Suddenly these men, these uneducated men, start preaching the good news, and people are shocked and by the boldness that they have, right? I testify to this morning, I can tell you in my own life, that I have experienced transformation that is only possible through Jesus. Heck, look at where we are right now. None of this is without existence of Jesus changing the hearts of so many people who chose to say, we need to establish a church that helps activate people, that gets them out of a rut, removes hesitations, and just starts to believe. This is possible just because of what Jesus has already done in a few hearts. And he's coming after your heart too. I'm really sorry about that, by the way. He is. But it's so interesting if you think about the men that we talked about earlier. Peter, John, the disciples went out and they testified. That day, 3,000 people came to Christ and they believed. They put their faith and their trust in Jesus. But it wasn't that they convinced them with a little more head knowledge. Here's some trivia for you. Here's a little something to stimulate your mind. What did the man in the crowd say? The man in the crowd said, we are cut to the heart. We're cut to the heart. What must we do? And they said, repent. Turn back to God. Stop living this life that is away from God, against God, and start just turning back to him and believe. Put your trust, put your full weight on Jesus, and he will take care of you. Our struggle of thinking about our doubt. Our struggle is thinking that our doubt will be solved by head knowledge, by some type of knowledge-based evidence, some tangible proof. When in actuality, the thing that we need the most is an act of trust to take place. At some point, we can collect as much data as we like, but at some point, you have to act on it. You have to act on it, and you have to start leaning on this faith with this personal relationship with Jesus. Because here's the best part. The best part is not just you trying to decide whether this is true or not. It's not just you who asks to act. Jesus is acting within that with you as well. His Spirit is upon you. But opening up to the one who has acted in your best interest is the thing that we eventually have to realize, that he has already acted before we have done anything. And that is the good news for us. I'm going to have Brendan, where is he? There he is. I'm going to have Brendan come up with the band, and we're gonna sing a song together. And perhaps today, I know for some, you don't want to talk about your doubt. You secretly try to just let's just not talk about it. Let's just avoid it. But if you've been struggling with doubting, here's what I want you to know. Instead of looking for more knowledge at this point, instead of going through that cycle, maybe today is just an opportunity for you to act in trust. Maybe it's just an act of trust that you need. And in this song where we sing and just say his name, that we praise his name, maybe that's just all that's needed at this point, is that you're going to lean on that and have that be true for you in your life. Or perhaps you have done that already. Perhaps you're like, I'm solid. I'm not doubting. I'm leaning full weight on Jesus. Yeah, but maybe it's time for you to start testifying. Maybe instead of holding that for yourself, maybe you start to realize the thing you need to be activated to the most is trusting that Jesus is going to take you somewhere that you never thought you were. Ryan always points this thing out to me, which is really hilarious. He always says, Rick, do you ever think you'd do this? Not in a million years. I would never be standing up here trying to start a church and tell you about Jesus a couple years ago. I liked ministering to kids. Adults scare me. But what's so fascinating about it is watching Jesus transform my life. Watching what he does to me. And at this point, I just have to praise his name. And I got to sing it boldly. I got to speak it boldly. I got to talk to every person that God has me interacting with, because my testimony might be the moment that they get their why. That they're no longer chasing head knowledge, and they finally are going to take the evidence that they have and they're going to put their trust in Jesus. So let's sing this song together. Let's sing it boldly and confess and surrender.